I stood at the entrance, clutching my small beaded purse like it was the last thing holding me together, when the girl at the guest list table barely looked up and said, "Name?" "Lorraine Mitchell," I replied. She scanned the paper, ran her finger down the list slow, then looked up with a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, there's no Lorraine Mitchell here." Before I could open my mouth, a familiar laugh cut clean through the music and chatter like a knife through butter. "Oh, that's because she's not invited," said my daughter-in-law Brielle, stepping up in her shimmering ivory gown like she owned the whole building. "But bless your heart for dressing up, Lorraine. Really. You look persistent." I didn't move. Not at first. Just stared at her, then at the woman holding the clipboard. "I'm the groom's mother." Brielle smiled wider, the kind of smile that says she's already won and wants you to know it. "Yes, I know who you are." No apology. No confusion. No, let me check with someone. Just that grin, bright and cold as a January morning, and the barest glance toward the ballroom doors where the music swelled and glasses clinked. And somewhere behind those doors, my son was laughing, toasting, celebrating, without me. I stood in that lobby in my plum dress with the lace collar, the one I'd picked out 3 weeks ago from that little shop on South Boulevard. Not because it was expensive, it wasn't, but because when I tried it on, I looked in the mirror and saw a woman you don't overlook. I'd pressed my hair myself that morning, set it in rollers the night before like Mama used to do. Even clasped on the gold chain Henry gave me on our 35th anniversary. I hadn't worn it since the day we buried him at Evergreen Cemetery, the whole congregation singing, "Precious Lord," while they lowered him down. And now I stood here, dismissed. My mouth went dry. I turned slowly to Brielle. "This must be some kind of mistake." "Oh, I don't think so." She tilted her head, her voice dripping with that sweet poison she'd perfected over the years. "Look, the hall's at capacity, and we really can't have any surprises tonight. You understand how these things are. Maybe there's another event you're meant to attend." My knees almost gave out. Not from age, though Lord knows these joints have seen better days, but from the sheer humiliation. I was being asked to leave, politely, publicly, from the wedding I paid for. And she knew. Of course she knew. The girl at the table looked embarrassed now, glancing between us like maybe she'd stepped into something she wanted no part of. "Should I check again?" But Brielle leaned in. "She's not expected," she said firmly. "Let's not make a scene." A scene. Is that what they feared from me? That I'd raise my voice or throw my purse or fall out sobbing in front of the crystal chandeliers? No. That wasn't me. Mama raised me better than that. So I nodded once. "I understand." I turned without another word, walked past the valet who offered me a puzzled look, and stepped out into the warm Carolina air. Charlotte's sun was sinking low, casting that golden hour light over the long rows of parked luxury cars. My old Buick LeSabre sat quietly between a black Mercedes and a BMW. Faithful as always. As I walked to it, my chest burned, not from shame. That had passed the moment Brielle smiled. But from something older, something quieter. Grief, I think. A new kind, stacked on top of the old kind that never fully left. Inside the car, I sat still, my hands resting on the wheel, my dress smooth across my knees. The leather seats smelled like church mints and cocoa butter, same as always. It was only then that the anger started. Slow. Methodical. Like coals catching beneath a grill. My name wasn't on the list. But my bank transfers were. Over $75,000, sent discreetly to the wedding agency, booked under anonymous sponsor, just as Brielle had requested, so her family, the Beaumonts, could take the credit. Her words, not mine. She'd sat across from me at my kitchen table, sipping the sweet tea I'd brewed, smiling that same smile, saying, it would mean the world to Derek if his in-laws felt like they were welcoming him as an equal. "You understand, don't you, Miss Lorraine?" At the time, I said yes because I thought I was saying yes to a future with my son still in it. Because I thought this gesture, this expensive, generous, unnecessary gesture, would rebuild something that had been cracking for years. I told myself, it's not about pride, Lorraine. It's about love. Let them have their moment. And I believed it. Lord help me, I believed it. I believed that love meant sacrificing your place in the light so someone else could shine. I believed that if I just stayed quiet, just stayed helpful, just kept giving, I'd be allowed to belong. But as those lobby doors shut behind me, I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. I had been erased. And it wasn't new. This wasn't the first time I'd been left off a list. Not the first time my son hadn't called, hadn't checked in. Not the first time I'd been too simple or too country or just a little too much for these kinds of events. The difference was, this time, I had funded the entire performance. I'd paid for the stage, the actors, the lights, the orchestra, and now they wanted me to sit quietly outside the theater like I was nobody. No. I started the car. The hotel shrank in the rearview mirror. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't curse anybody's name, though I had a few choice words sitting right on the tip of my tongue. That would have been too easy. I simply drove. And as I passed the florist shop on Park Road where I'd ordered the centerpieces, 12 tables worth of white roses and magnolias, Brielle's favorites, I pulled over and opened my phone. The bank app lit up. So did the email from the wedding planner. And right then, something shifted. My fingers stopped trembling. My back straightened. My thoughts clicked into place like the clasp on Mama's old Bible. They hadn't put my name on the guest list. But they were about to learn just how important that name really was. And this time, there would be no mistake. I didn't go straight home. I needed the drive. I needed the miles between me and that marble lobby where my name hadn't mattered. Charlotte blurred by outside the windows, the old brick churches, the slow-moving couples walking hand in hand, the barbecue spot on Beatty's Ford Road where Henry and I used to split a plate of ribs every Friday after payday. Everything looked the same. Only I had changed. I stopped at a red light and glanced at the envelope resting on the passenger seat. Inside was the card I'd signed that morning. For your new beginning, with all my love, Mama, and a cashier's check for $10,000. Honeymoon money. A soft landing. I tucked it in with care, thinking it would be a private, quiet gift. No fuss, no credit. Just a mother's blessing. Now it looked absurd. I'd prepared for a celebration they'd already written me out of. When I reached my house, the yellow bungalow on Beatty's Ford Road with the wraparound porch and the creaky step Henry swore he'd fix every summer but never did, the sun had nearly set. The porch light was on. I always left it on. Mama said a dark porch means nobody's home, and even if nobody was, I wanted the house to disagree. I didn't turn on the inside lights. I sat on the edge of my bed, toes resting against the worn carpet, and just listened to the stillness. The kind of silence that isn't peace but proof. No one was going to call. No one was going to ask where I was. They had all the guests they needed. I changed out of my dress carefully, folded it, smoothed the lace collar, laid it over the back of the armchair where Henry's robe still hung. Then I walked barefoot into the kitchen and opened the drawer beside the sink. Inside, stacked in folders, bank statements, invoices, printed emails. I pulled out the one labeled Derek's wedding. Yes, Derek. Not D. Not Derek, like he'd started spelling it on his business cards. Not the polished corporate name he wore now like a costume. He was Derek when I first held him, red-faced and hollering with his father's broad nose and my mama's stubborn chin. He was Derek when he clung to my hip after Sunday school. He was Derek when I sat up past midnight at the sewing machine, letting out his church pants because that boy grew faster than corn in July. And now I was just his mother. A logistical nuisance. A line item not worth including. I opened the folder. Receipts. Email threads. Contracts with the wedding agency. Itemized lists. Venue rental. Floral arrangements. Catering for 120 guests. Photographer. Live band. Customized invitations with gold foil embossing. It totaled just over $76,400. All paid by me, quietly, through my personal accounts, just as Brielle had arranged. Except Derek hadn't asked. Brielle had. Polite. Polished. Smiling over my kitchen table, explaining how it would be a gift that means the world to him. How he just wouldn't accept it if he knew it came from you. How it would help him stand tall in front of the Beaumonts. I'd believed her. Believed she was trying to help us heal. I didn't see it then, how she framed me as a burden, not a blessing. She'd crafted a version of me I barely recognized. Someone easy to leave off a list. Someone you don't need in the room. I stared at the bottom of one contract. Banquet final payment scheduled, September 14th, 6 a.m. That was tomorrow. Meaning there was still time. I picked up the phone and dialed. First National of Charlotte, this is Patricia, came the voice on the other end. Hello, Patricia. This is Lorraine Mitchell. I'd like to speak to my personal accounts manager, please. A pause, then cheerful efficiency. Yes, Mrs. Mitchell. One moment while I connect you. Click. Then a different voice, brisk and warm. Mrs. Mitchell, it's Charles. What can I do for you this evening? Charles, I said calmly. I need you to halt all pending transactions related to the Mitchell-Beaumont wedding. Immediately. A pause. Typing. Ma'am, that includes several payments scheduled within the next 12 hours. Catering, hotel ballroom, entertainment. Is there a particular concern? Yes, I said. The concern is that the people hosting that wedding made sure I wasn't invited. Silence. I'm very sorry to hear that, Charles said slowly. But technically, these were authorized payments. Some might already be in process. Then stop whatever hasn't cleared, and flag anything else. I'll accept the penalty fees. I understand. Give me just a moment to check the transaction queue. I waited, staring at the magnolia arrangement I'd ordered a week ago, now starting to wilt in a glass vase on the counter. Brielle had insisted on magnolias. Said they were refined. I'd bitten my tongue. Charles returned. We can halt the final venue payment, the balance for the band, and the late catering costs. The photographer's deposit has cleared, so has the decoration team's base fee. Everything else can be stopped before processing. Do it. Yes, ma'am. I'll follow up with confirmation emails. Would you like us to notify the vendors? No, I said. I'll handle it. After I hung up, I sat in silence again, not waiting for tears this time, not mourning. Something else was blooming inside me. A calm, sharp awareness, like the first light of morning after a long, restless night. They wanted me invisible? Fine. But now, invisibility would be their problem. I picked up the envelope again, the gift they didn't want, and slid the check out. I ripped it neatly down the center, then again into quarters. Tiny pieces scattered like confetti on the kitchen floor. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the wedding agency. Golden Arch Events. This is Keisha. Hello, Keisha. This is Lorraine Mitchell. A beat. Oh, Mrs. Mitchell. Is everything all right? No. But I'm going to make it all right. I could hear her swallow. I need to cancel all pending services for the Mitchell-Beaumont wedding, effective immediately. But that's tomorrow. She trailed off, flustered. Mrs. Mitchell, the hotel, the staff, that's hundreds of people. Are you sure? They're not my concern anymore, I said. None of them are. By morning, Charlotte was buzzing. I knew because Keisha called back twice. First at 7, then again just before 9. Her voice climbing higher with each ring, stretched thin between professionalism and pure panic. Mrs. Mitchell, the hotel needs confirmation. They're threatening to cancel the ballroom. And the caterers, they're beside themselves. We have 120 guests expecting dinner tonight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't apologize. I already confirmed my cancellation, I said. The payments have been stopped. The services will not be rendered. Let whoever was going to take the credit take the cost, too. There was a silence long enough that I imagined her blinking into the phone, trying to decide whether to argue or beg. Then she muttered, "I'll inform the couple." "You do that." I ended the call and turned off the phone. I'd said all I needed to. Outside, the air was warm and thick, that heavy Carolina heat that September can't quite shake, the kind that sits on your skin like a wool blanket you didn't ask for. I stepped onto the porch and lowered myself into the old rocking chair, the one Henry built from scrap pine the summer Derek turned 5. My knees complained in that familiar nagging way, but I settled in. I stared at the quiet street. Same neighbors. Same oak trees dripping with Spanish moss down the block. Same wind chime Ruthie hung on her porch that clinked every time a breeze came through. Everything out there was the same. Only I had changed. For years, I'd watched myself disappear in small, careful ways. An invitation that didn't arrive. A thank you that never came. A story told at Sunday dinner as if I hadn't lived it, hadn't funded it, hadn't loved through every broken piece of it. I told myself it was the price of black motherhood, the quiet sacrifice. You raise them up, you let them shine, you step back. Your job is done. But what they did yesterday wasn't forgetting. It was exclusion. It was removal. It was, in every sense of the word, a severing. And I was done pretending it didn't cut. By noon, the first sign that the outside world had caught up came not by phone, but by knock. I opened the door and found Naomi, my granddaughter, standing on the porch. Hair still pinned from last night's rehearsal dinner, eyes wide with something between panic and awe. "Grandma," she whispered. "What did you do?" I stepped aside. "Come in, baby." She dropped her bag by the door and turned to face me, not even trying to hide her distress. "The venue is calling everyone. There's no banquet, no music. The hotel says the payment was revoked. Daddy's losing his mind. Brielle's crying. Her parents are threatening to sue the agency." I raised a hand. "Sit down, Naomi." She sank onto the couch like someone had pulled the bones right out of her. "You cancelled everything?" "I did. But why?" I looked at her carefully. This girl, this only true light left in that fractured family. She'd always seen me. Visited on Saturdays without being asked. Braided my hair when my fingers got too stiff. Brought me peach cobbler from that bakery on Central Avenue because she remembered I liked it warm with a little vanilla ice cream on top. She held my hand at Henry's funeral, didn't let go the whole service, not even when Pastor Johnson's eulogy went long and the choir sang, "Going Up Yonder," and the whole church fell apart. I owed her the truth. "They didn't want me there," I said. "Your father and Brielle made that very clear." Naomi's face turned red. "That's not. I mean, I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I thought you were coming. I saved you a seat at my table. I assumed they knew I'd paid for everything," I interrupted gently. "But they didn't want me in the room. They wanted my money, not my presence." Her voice broke. "That's disgusting." "No, sweetheart," I said, softening. "It's honest. For once, I see it clearly." She blinked away tears, then sat upright. "But what happens now? There's a whole wedding tonight. People flying in, photographers, a band. What are they going to do?" "I imagine," I said, standing slowly, "they'll do what grown adults do when life doesn't go as planned. They'll figure it out." "And you?" she asked. "What are you going to do?" I gave her a thin smile. "I'm going to open a new account in your name." She looked stunned. "Wait, what?" I nodded. The money I'd set aside for the wedding, the honeymoon, the gifts, it's going somewhere it's wanted. Somewhere it matters. I want to set up a trust for your education, your future. Whatever you need. You're finishing up at Spelman, and I want you walking across that stage debt-free. She shook her head, tears starting again. "Grandma, I didn't ask for." "I know you didn't." I touched her cheek, felt the warmth of her skin, so much like her grandfather's. That's exactly why it's yours. We sat in silence for a while. Naomi curled into the corner of the couch. Me in the old chair by the window. Henry's Bible still on the side table where he'd left it. Outside, a cardinal landed on the fence post. The wind shifted. Somewhere down the street, children were laughing, and the smell of somebody's grill drifted through the screen door. Charcoal and hickory, the smell of a Saturday that didn't know about our troubles. "Does he know?" she asked finally. "Daddy, that you cancelled everything?" "I expect he does by now. And what about you being the one who paid for it all?" I tilted my head. I imagine that part's just starting to dawn on him. Naomi rubbed at her eyes. "I wish I could be a fly on the wall." I smiled. "No need to be a fly. You'll get the fallout soon enough." A beat. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice small. "I'm tired," I said honestly. "But I'm not sorry." She stood, walked over, and knelt at my feet like she used to when she was a little girl playing church, pretending to be the preacher, using my footstool as a pulpit. "I love you, Grandma," she said simply. I reached for her hands. "I know. And I love you, baby. That's why I did this." We stayed like that for a while, old and young, linked not by guilt or performance, but by truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need decoration. That evening, long after Naomi had gone, the doorbell rang again. This time, I didn't answer right away. I already knew who it was. I waited until the second knock to get up, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted the silence to speak first. I walked to the front door slowly, my house slippers making no sound on the hardwood. Through the peephole, I saw exactly who I expected. Derek. He wasn't in a suit anymore. Just a wrinkled button-down and slacks, like he'd thrown them on in a hurry. His jaw was clenched tight. Not worry, not guilt. Control. Derek never led with emotion. He led with strategy. Had since he was a teenager, figuring out how to talk his way out of trouble with that same tight jaw and those same sharp eyes. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Mom," he said, breath tight. "We need to talk." I looked at him for a moment. My son. Taller than his father ever was. Grey already threading through his temples. Henry's eyes, deep brown, heavy-lidded, couldn't meet mine. "So talk," I said, resting one hand on the doorframe. "Can I come in?" "No." That stopped him. He blinked, almost like he hadn't considered the possibility. Derek was used to being granted entry, into rooms, into conversations, into second chances. He glanced behind him, then leaned closer. "Brielle's in a panic. The venue is threatening legal action. The caterers walked. Guests are arriving in 3 hours. What in the world is going on?" I crossed my arms. "I cancelled the payments." "I know that," he snapped. "Why?" I stared at him. "Because I wasn't invited." He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Mom, is this really about that?" I tilted my head. "You mean the part where your wife laughed in my face and told the staff I wasn't on the guest list? Or the part where you stood behind those doors and said nothing?" It wasn't supposed to go like that. "But it did. That's how it went. And you let it happen." He looked away, jaw working. I watched him, this man I'd nursed through fevers, driven to football practice, held while he cried the night his daddy died, and I saw a stranger wearing my son's face. And yet somehow, I added quietly, my money was allowed to attend. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Turn this into some kind of martyr thing. You said you didn't want credit. You insisted on staying anonymous. We thought." "No," I cut in. "You didn't think at all. You used me. And when it came time to honor me, to save me one seat, Derek, just one, you erased me." "That's not true," he said. "But it didn't have teeth. You're twisting things." I nodded slowly. "All right. Let's untwist them. Tell me, at what point did you decide I wasn't welcome?" He flinched. That's what I thought, I said quietly. There was a long silence between us. Night insects were starting up. The porch light hummed. He shifted his weight, hands on his hips, then dropped them. Brielle thought. He began, but I stopped him with a raised hand. Don't you dare put this on your wife. I don't care if she whispered it or screamed it from the rooftop. You made the decision. You let it happen. You let me stand there like a fool, Derek. In front of strangers. In front of that girl with the clipboard who didn't know whether to look at me or look away. He didn't answer. He couldn't. And I think, just maybe, he felt a flicker of something he'd been running from for years. So now what? He asked finally, voice lower. You've tanked your own son's wedding out of spite? No, I said calmly. I've reclaimed my dignity. He looked at me like I was speaking in tongues. I leaned against the door frame. You've been borrowing pieces of me for years, Derek. My savings. My name. My time. My forgiveness. And I gave it all freely because I believed you loved me. Even if you didn't show it well. Even if you'd changed. But yesterday, my throat tightened for the first time. Yesterday, you told the whole world that I'm disposable. And I heard you. Loud and clear. He swallowed hard. His voice turned tight again. We can't afford to fix this on our own. There are penalties, contracts, reputations. And none of that was my concern until today, I said. You want the money, Derek? Then you get me with it. That's the deal. Always was. You just stopped liking the terms. He was quiet for a long moment. The street was still. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Then he said, So what, you're done with us now? After everything? I stared at him. What is everything? Exactly. 1,000 small slights? A decade of distance? You stopped being my son the day you decided I was an obstacle to the life you were building. His expression shifted, anger cracking open into something rawer. Desperation. Mom. No, I said, and this time my voice didn't waver. You don't get to call me that today. We stood like that for a long time. Two people with blood in common and precious little else. The porch light flickered once, like even the house was holding its breath. Then I stepped back and began to close the door. He caught it. Please, he said, quieter this time, almost like the boy I used to know. What do I tell them? I held his gaze. Tell them the truth. And I closed the door. This time, he let it shut. The silence after the door clicked shut was different this time. It wasn't thick with regret or heavy with hesitation. It was clean, like a room that had finally been aired out after years of holding someone else's smoke. I stood there for a moment, hands still on the doorknob, listening. He didn't knock again. He didn't yell through the wood. He just stood there. I could feel it, then turned and left. I watched from the window as he walked down the front path, shoulders hunched, steps uneven. My Derek. Not the boy I raised. The one who scraped his knee on the driveway and came running to me with tears and trust, but the man who had grown out of needing me and somewhere along the way grown into resenting me for still being here. That man walked down my path and didn't look back. I sat back down at the kitchen table. The envelope, now empty, still lay near the edge. Across from it, my sweet tea from earlier, gone warm. The magnolias I'd bought for the reception centerpiece were starting to droop, their petals curling inward like hands folding in prayer. Fitting. Then my phone began to ring. Brielle. Her name flashed across the screen. I let it vibrate in my hand before answering. I wanted to hear what excuse she'd find this time. I picked up but didn't speak first. Lorraine, she said, her voice set in that strained register. Soft, high, polished, the voice she used when she wanted something. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No, I said. There hasn't. A pause. I'm sorry if you felt unwelcome yesterday. That wasn't our intention. You told the staff I wasn't on the list, Brielle. Well, the list was coordinated through the planner. There may have been a mix-up. You laughed, I interrupted. You looked me in the eye and laughed. Another pause. Shorter this time. Her next words came clipped, the polish starting to crack. I was under the impression that you wanted to remain in the background. Derek told me. I said I didn't want credit. I didn't say I wanted to be erased. Her breath caught. Okay. I can see you're upset, and I understand, really. But we're in a very delicate situation right now. Guests are arriving. The venue's in chaos. The caterers say they won't come unless they're paid up front. Then pay them. She hesitated. We don't have that kind of liquidity on short notice. Everything was arranged under your. And now it's not, I said. Your event. Your problem. Lorraine, she said sharply, the mask falling clean off now. You can't just pull out at the last minute and expect everything to run smooth. You pulled me out of the guest list, I replied. I'm just returning the favor. Silence. Then, look, let's just be adults about this. Maybe we both made some mistakes. We can find a way to fix it together. I'm not interested in fixing this, Brielle. Then what do you want? She asked, and I could finally hear the panic she'd been trying to bury under all that composure. I want my son to understand that actions have consequences, I said quietly. I want you both to feel, just for a moment, what it's like to be invisible, unwanted, cast aside. By ruining our wedding? I almost laughed. I didn't ruin anything. I just took back what was mine. You know this is going to hurt Derek's reputation. His firm, his partners, everyone's there tonight. You're embarrassing him. I think he managed that on his own. She made a sound through her teeth, something between a sigh and a hiss. I don't understand why you're doing this. No, I said. You don't. And that's the problem. And I hung up. It felt like slamming a door shut on a house I'd been living in too long. By 4 o'clock, the text messages started rolling in. Naomi sent the first one. Grandma, they're trying to rebook a local restaurant. It's a mess. Brielle's father is on the phone with a lawyer. Then a few minutes later, waiters walked out. Cake never arrived. Some guests already leaving. I didn't reply. Not yet. At 5:30, a voicemail came from Derek. His voice sounded like gravel. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about yesterday. About how it was handled. We didn't think you'd come. You said you didn't want attention. We thought it was better that way. I was trying to protect the moment. He paused. I didn't mean to humiliate you, but I guess I did. Can we please talk before tonight? He didn't say, I love you. He didn't say, come back. I deleted the message without saving it. Then I looked out at the trees. The wind had picked up. The sky was beginning to bruise with purple and orange, the way Charlotte sunsets do when the humidity breaks. And I thought, good. Let them scramble. Let them taste a little of what silence feels like when it's all that answers your reach. By 6 o'clock, I could imagine the ballroom at the Ballantine Grand sitting dark. The musicians packing up their instruments, annoyed. The servers returning their pressed uniforms. The wedding planner pacing with her headset askew, whispering apologies into the void. And the guests, dressed in their Sunday best, standing around holding warm flutes of flat champagne. No music. No food. No bride and groom at the altar. Just confusion, whispers, and the slow, visible unraveling of something that was supposed to be perfect. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't sabotage. This was truth, finally standing up on its own 2 feet. Later that evening, Naomi came back. Heels in her hand, bun falling apart, mascara smudged. But when she looked at me, something in her expression had settled. Hi, she said. I let her in without a word. She sat at the kitchen table, and I poured us both cold water. We sat in the quiet for a while. The Beaumonts found out they didn't pay for anything, she said. Her father was yelling at Daddy in front of everybody. Called him a fraud. Said he'd embarrassed the whole family. People were whispering. Some of them figured out it was you. I met her eyes. Good. They should have known all along. She swallowed. Do you regret it? No. Not for 1 second. They didn't just exclude you, she said quietly. They used you, then tried to pretend you were never part of it. I let them, I said. For years. I wanted so badly to believe that if I gave enough, eventually I'd be invited back in. We drove out that night, just the two of us, windows down, warm air rushing through the car. Naomi pulled into the overlook off Route 49, the one with the rusted fence and the wooden bench where you could see the whole city spread out below like a quilt somebody stitched with lights. We sat on that bench. Below us, Charlotte glimmered. Somewhere down there, my son was pacing in a borrowed suit, trying to salvage a night built on a lie. I keep thinking about how you must have felt, Naomi said softly, standing there at that entrance. It wasn't the first time, I said. They've been closing doors on me for years. This was just the first time they did it out loud. She took a shaky breath. I'll never understand how they could do that to you. They don't need me, I said simply. They need what I give. But that's over now. She was quiet for a long time, then barely above a whisper. I'm glad you said no. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman she was becoming. Honest. Sharp. Capable of seeing the whole truth, not just the version people dress up for company. Me too, I said. The days that followed moved slowly, like the air after a summer storm, thick but clear. I planted marigolds in the front yard, dropped off a pot of collard greens at Ruthie's when I heard her coughing through the wall, repainted the back fence the color Henry always wanted, deep green, like the pines up in the mountains where we spent our honeymoon. One morning, I pulled out old photo albums. Not from nostalgia but curiosity. Birthdays with homemade cake. Tiny shoes by the front door. Easter Sunday pictures. Everybody in white. Report cards on the fridge. I documented everything like it might someday prove I'd been a good mother. But what struck me wasn't what I'd recorded. It was what I hadn't. No photo of me at the hospital after Henry died. No record of the check I wrote to save Derek's business in 2011. No image of the year I cancelled my own dental work to help pay for Naomi's braces. Those moments, the ones that cost me most, had passed like ghosts. And maybe that hurt more than the wedding ever could. That Friday, Naomi brought me a letter. Manila envelope. Derek's handwriting. She said he didn't think I'd open it if it came in the mail. She was right. I read it at the kitchen table while she waited. Mama, I don't deserve for you to read this, but I need to write it anyway. I've been replaying everything. Not just the wedding. All of it. The years of help. The things you gave without asking anything back. The times I should have said thank you and didn't. You were right. I wanted the image more than the truth. I wanted Brielle's family to see me as someone who had arrived. And I thought if I kept you in the background, it would be cleaner. But now I see what I really did. I erased you. I watched them turn you away. I heard it. I saw it. And I did nothing. I can't ask you to forgive me. But I want you to know, I see you. And I'm sorry. Derek. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. He's trying, I said. That's something. Days later, a package arrived from Derek. A small handmade photo album, covered in linen. The first page held a single line. She was there for everything. Then pictures. Old ones. Me holding him on the first day of kindergarten. Me in the bleachers at his high school game. Me at the kitchen table mending his pants. Me with Naomi on my hip, reading her a story. Me and Henry on our last anniversary, his hand over mine. It wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement. I placed it on the shelf in the hallway, right between the books that had shaped me and the ones I hadn't yet read. Spring came. I took a painting class, acrylics, Tuesday mornings. The instructor called me Miss Lorraine, like we were family. One of my classmates, Pearl, was 73 and only painted birds. She said, "I used to paint people, but they never stayed." We laughed until our sides ached. I planted tomatoes where Henry's garden used to be. They came in crooked and stubborn, but they came. And when I sliced the first one into a salad, I didn't think about Henry. I didn't think about Derek. I just thought, this is enough. Naomi graduated from Spelman that May. She wore a white dress and walked across that stage like she'd been walking toward it her whole life. When they called her name, I stood. Not because anyone else did, just because I wanted her to see me. Steady, proud, unafraid of being seen. She found me in the crowd afterward and hugged me so hard my knees buckled. "You didn't just save me, Grandma," she whispered. "You taught me how to not disappear." I held her tighter. That summer, I sat on the porch one evening with a glass of sweet tea, watching the sun drop behind the same oak trees that had been here since before Derek was born. The wind chime on Ruthie's porch sang its little song. A breeze moved through the leaves, soft, certain, like a hand on your shoulder from someone who's been gone but hasn't left. And I thought, this is what it means to live unedited. Not loudly, not for show, but fully, completely, as myself. If this story meant something to you, if you saw your own silence somewhere in mine, share it. Leave a comment. Or better yet, write your own ending. Because no one else gets to choose how your story ends. Only you do.